So, Mike. No.
Hello. So we have the Sleipner field in a place that we'll talk about in like 3 seconds. So when we were searching it, we were wondering, is Sleipner the mythical beast that comes and captures CO2, or is it some other answer to all our CO2 worries? Well, we're going to talk about the Sleipner field first, and we'll get back to the mythical beast later. So the Sleipner gas field produces, the gas it's producing has roughly 9% of natural CO2, and the traditional ways of removing the CO2 in this field were to just scrub it and directly vent the CO2 into the atmosphere. But for the EU standards for gas pipelines, you have to have 2.5% CO2 or less. So the gas being produced had to be scrubbed from 9% or wherever it is down to 2.5% or better. So they decided to try and inject the CO2 into another formation. And one little side note, through this process they're running an electric turbine which is producing 6 megawatts of power from the CO2 that they're pulling out of the gas and then injecting. So the history behind the project is that in 1991 the Norwegian government instituted a carbon tax, and it's roughly somewhere between 40 and 50 US dollars per ton of CO2. And the choice that the Sleipner gas field had to choose was either pay the carbon tax or come up with a different solution. So they decided to try and start injecting CO2, which they started in 1996, and it is the world's first carbon capture and storage or sequestration demonstration site. This is where it is. That is right in between Norwegian waters and United Kingdom waters. Obviously, since they're having a Norwegian carbon tax, it's in Norwegian waters. But that's the little dot is the exact location, and the white flame-looking thing, that's actually the Utsira Formation. That's the sand where they are injecting the CO2. So the geology is the field is the Sleipner gas field. The formation they're producing the gas out of is the Hemdal sandstone, which is this lower black band. Not sure if you guys can see it. It's the lower black band down here, right along here. And it is one of the largest producers in the Norwegian side of the North Sea. And then the injection formation where they're putting the CO2 is the Utsira sandstone here, all along here. And then the cap rock, which is the one that seals the reservoir so that way the CO2 doesn't leak, is the Nordland shale. And the picture on your right, the green it's just a pretty picture. The green is where they're pumping out the gas, and then the whole blue formation is again the Utsira sand where they're pumping in the CO2. Currently they're fixating about 1 million tons of CO2 per year, and again it's in the Utsira Formation. The picture on the left shows the Utsira Formation, and it is a map view showing the thickness of the formation, and the little black dot that says Sleipner, that's where the Sleipner platform is, where they're injecting the CO2. And here's some more pictures, basically showing the same thing again. And the reason the Utsira Formation is such a good reservoir for CO2 sequestration is because it's highly porous, and a very permeable sand, which means we should be able to pump in a lot of CO2. The potential storage capacity is roughly 5.5 times 10 to the 11 meters cubed, which is somewhere around 600 billion tons of carbon if we were to completely fill up the pore space. And at current fixation rates, the formation could hold hundreds of years of CO2 injecting before we would have to worry about it at all. So to sum up the introduction really quickly, the Utsira sand is really good for the Sleipner oil field because they have to do something to not pay this carbon tax, or they have to pay it, and they've got a lot of CO2 being produced out of the gas, and they have this aquifer available. So the solution is to try CO2 sequestration. Now this is a diagram showing the basic idea. There's two fields in the total Sleipner gas field, Sleipner West, and then separated, and then the Sleipner East. What's happening is they're pumping gas from both of these, and they're transporting the raw gas from the Sleipner West gas field over to one area where they're scrubbing all of the gas and then pulling out the CO2. The methane is going into the pipeline, and then they are pumping the CO2 back into the Utsira sand. I'm going to have Mike explain what exactly is going on, a little bit more details of the technical process.